there are three areas that we're going to talk about. Firstly, like what is a good extension, right? Secondly, what is strategy in debating? And thirdly is how to utilize certain concepts of this strategy. Some of them you heard, like characterization or frame, inheritance, examples, etc. So few disclaimers before we start. Firstly, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, even though that I'm using one. So I'm going to use it mostly for examples, because I'm going to go over a few examples, so like it's easier to have the motion on big screen rather to me to read like 3 sentences and then read again because sound isn't here, etc. So like other than that, there will be no material in the slides. You're going to need to like listen, engage, or ask questions if you have, etc., etc. The second disclaimer is that these are some things that I find useful and that some other people that like either I coached or we talked about this find useful. I don't think this is the exhaustive list of all the things about extension or about the strategy. This is not the like Holy Grail or like whatever book that contains all the knowledge about everything about these topics. Just some things that I think can be useful, etc. And I think thirdly, this should be generally your approach. I think generally for all the workshops, but for this specific one definitely, is that like, look, all of us, we were never judged because we knew what extension is or because we knew what to do in situation X or whatever. We were judged because we gave speeches and there was a judge, and then the judge gave first or fourth or something in between, and speakers, etc. And these are the things that in the end make it or break it. So this is all of these things should be seen as instrumental towards you getting better in debating, winning more rounds, getting higher scores, breaking at more competitions, etc. Right? So like if you think that some things don't work to you, doesn't make sense, you just don't really vibe, etc. Obviously, feel free to ask questions, etc. But if you believe that they don't feel for you, I guess it's fine. Okay? So far, so good. So we're going to start with the first thing, which is what is a good extension. So firstly, what is generally an extension? Extension is something new. So like whatever new material that was not presented in the top half constitutes an extension. So like as long as you have any new analysis that was not presented before, you have an extension. However, just having an extension is not enough. You need to have a good extension, or extension with which you're going to win over the other teams. And this is, I think, a bit more trickier question, because what does constitute a good extension? So, a very short answer will be something new that is better than what was already said. But obviously, the first thing that you point out is like, okay, but what does it mean that something is better than what we already have that was already said? And I think this is very important to understand that like there is no clear answer like, okay, these are the exhaustive list of criteria under which something constitutes a winning extension or not. Sometimes the judges will disagree in the panel like whether the extension is new enough or winning enough or the top half team, etc. But there are a few aspects that I think that you can think of that might make extension new. So I think first thing, new and qualitatively better. One thing is like you can have a completely new argument. And this is something that, though it is great, it is, I would say, relatively rare. Why it is the case? Because as you get better in debating, and you get to better rooms, or if you debate at some stronger competitions, etc., there are more other people that also got better in debating, are also debating these like good competitions, or in these good rooms, etc. And often, it doesn't take too long for people to grasp the most basic ideas that you can run in a debate. And I think Valina was talking a little bit about it, like, look, like after some times you just kind of see patterns, you see that some things are repeating, etc., and then you just basically are aware of what should be run in certain rounds, and you're able to give few stock arguments, etc. So like, I think often what is the case is that rarely you will be in the position that you are extending, and that you have something that is relatively basic argument that no one mentions and no one explains it before you. It might happen if you have like less experienced teams, or sometimes teams can screw up like and just don't run some basic stuff. But often these basic stuff and basic aspects will be run. I think, in my opinion, one of the main exception to this, once when you can run completely new claims, that I think is something that is not only circumstantial but like general case, is principal argument, or the arguments, I think all arguments are principal, but the arguments are not utilitarian, or rather arguments that have certain value and principle that is the reason why we have them. So it's not like more or less happiness, as Chris was talking about, but rather certain value that exists for the purpose of this value, right? These arguments often are difficult to prove and require some time and have often more burdens, which meaning that often teams in the top half are not able to fully prove them. And this is something that often you will have the chance to extend. Like it's rarely the case that the top half teams covers all of the basic arguments and also all of the principles. I mean, it can happen, but like if you're in the room that someone gave 86 and 87 speeches, the least of your worries is going to be that you're not going to have extension in that room. I mean, you just, you're already kind of winning simply because you're there. So, so just be aware of that. Like, this is, I think, one exception where you can think of, okay, completely new idea for the extension that can win. One important thing here, just because you have completely new idea and completely new principle, still doesn't mean that this new principle necessarily wins over the rest of the top half that was utilitarian. You still need to prove that your principle matters more than their utility. If I go into details of this, I think I'm going to spend 2 hours talking about the principles, etc. But just I want this simply to have a note here that like this is one way how we can actually extend in terms of having new arguments. We can talk maybe later during the whole this weekend if you want more about the principal arguments, etc. But what I think is more often the more realistic scenarios, because frankly with the principles I think like even at the top level I'm not sure this is the most often extension that I'm hearing, like even in top rooms of worlds, etc. It's not like that I hear well-developed principles all the time. I think more often what is likely going to be is that you're going to use some things that were said in the top half and you're going to make them qualitatively better so that they are much more persuasive. And there are few areas that I think are, again, non-exhaustive list of things that you can extend on. Firstly, is that you can feel certain missing burdens or missing mechanization of analysis or whatever word you can use, like there are different angles of this, of the arguments of the team in front of you. Now, few very important things. Just because there is some missing analysis doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good thing. It needs to be a crucial analysis. So you need to explain why this specific burden matters, like why it is crucial for the argument to work, right? So let's maybe use a few examples that will make this a bit more, bit less abstract, let's say. So let's say that I don't know, debate is about, debate is like about intervention in Yemen. So this house believes that US should intervene in Yemen. So like very hard motion, military like style, like lots of mechs, etc. And let's say that you are closing government. And you're opening government around certain, like, look, we're gonna win the war, US has a stronger army and is more powerful, and then they just impact and explain why winning the war is important, etc. One way to, like, you can extend this same argument, say, look, you need to prove that you're going to win the war in order for all these impacts to materialize. They only tell you they have better army. This is insufficient, right? As it was the case maybe in some other situations, but like it wasn't the crucial thing that's made change. We're going to give you like 3 reasons why this is why US definitely are going to win the war. As such, and then you give these reasons, okay? As such, we believe that we're going to provide you the burden that is missing in opening government, and without this burden, their impacts don't materialize, right? So this is the type of way that you're doing to explain why your analysis, even though both things are like debating the same argument, that the analysis that you're feeling is crucial here. The bad way of feeling burdens might be, for example, if they have these impacts like civil war in Yemen will stop, we're going to stop all of these different fractions, group, guerrillas, terrorists, etc. The bad way will be, okay, opening government doesn't explain why stopping of civil war is bad. We're going to give you 5 structural reasons why stopping of civil war is bad. Why is this a bad feeling? Why this is bad extension? Does anyone know the reason why the former extension was good, this one is bad? Yeah, sorry.
So adding to that doesn't add so much to the argument, and that's kind of win at least over the
Yeah,
argument.
exactly. So basically, the question in debate is not whether war is bad. We all agree upon this, like presumably, but likely in debate everyone will agree upon this. So what is the challenge in the round is whether you're actually going to stop the war or you're going to have a more war and more instability, right? So this is the comparative. We all agree that this is a burden that OG maybe didn't explain, but all, either implicitly or explicitly, in most of the cases, agreed with this. As such, fulfilling this burden, while this is a nice talk, and nice, maybe if you're Miss Universe and want to talk about peace in the world, but in the debate, in terms of qualitatively moving the argument further, you're not doing much because you're not engaging with what is the clash, okay? So one heuristic in terms of whether something is a qualitatively better analysis is whether it helps you win the clash, the things that teams disagree upon. If everyone agrees upon it, then it's trivial, right? It is similar if they explain, I mean, maybe even more trivial example, but if they give 5 structural reasons why, I don't know, US Army speaks better English than Yemeni soldiers, right? I mean, this is all a true analysis. This, you can say it's maybe, relevant for something, but it just doesn't help you win the round. It doesn't engage with the clash. It doesn't do anything. You can give the best possible analysis for this. It's going to be completely irrelevant. Obviously, this example is very extreme, and I'm not. I don't think anyone would run this. But just I want to show the principle in terms of how what kind of missing burdens are good or bad to extent. I think similarly, you can extend on impacts. In terms of sometimes impacts are relatively easy, right? If impacts is literally we're going to stop the war or not, like in this case, I think the impact is relatively not that difficult. But there are sometimes debates where impacts are a bit kind of shaky, unclear, to which extent they happen, where exactly the materials, etc. I think a good example is social movements or any kind of changes about any group, let's say women, LGBT, certain racial groups or whatever. I think that in all of these instances, I think often what is the case is that the impacts are not that clear. So let's again maybe use one example. So the motion is this house supports rainbow capitalism. So rainbow capitalism, this is basically just having the LGBT plus or queer movement being more commercialized. So having gay Oreo cakes, having lots of companies marketing themselves on Pride, having all these brandings like Celebrate Diversity, June is Pride Month, and then each company at least in the West kind of portrays themselves gay friendly, etc., etc. And then let's say so most of this house supports this, and let's say okay, you have some basic idea about the impact, which is okay, this is gonna promote visibility of LGBT people, and this is good, right? But what the devil is often in the details. And here the details is what does it mean promoting visibility? Because just because someone is going to see the ad that has, I don't know, gay Oreo cake, I mean, it's literally, if it ends there, it's very, very, how do you say, it's very trivial, who cares? Oh, sure, it provides visibility, but no one cares. And then it is, this is a very, very small impact. Visibility is something that is not impact per se, I would say, it's just unfinished argument. But then, so this is one extreme of the impact. The second extreme of the impact might be saying, look, everyone will now see, I don't know, how do you say, these messages, and then people, how do you say, engage with it, they see about it, they try to think about it, they become more progressive, and we don't discriminate more gays because we have rainbow capitalism. And now, obviously, we have two very, very extreme types of impacts. One is basically very little impact in terms of very, very being weak. Another one is solving the world hunger, or in this case, LGBT rights, simply by having certain like commercialization of it, right? Both of these impacts seems very, very extreme, right? In terms of one is who cares, second one is like very difficult to prove. And then I think what is difficult to do in this argument is to find some balance that you have sufficient impact that actually say, okay, we do matter, these things does matter. I'm going to explain how this can be done, but like just one, maybe one reason why this is relevant to do is that, for example, opposition here can say, look, it is bad because I think there are two like directions that you can think of that can screw you if your impact is small. I think one can be the principle saying it is immoral to earn money based on the suffering on queer people if you're just capitalist that is not associated with queer discrimination in any way. The second thing might be, look, often these companies are discriminating their queer staff. They are like underpaid. They cannot be open up. They cannot be out. They face lots of discrimination, etc. And now they are actually portraying that they are actually friendly, meaning that it's much more difficult for these people to fight for their rights. And I think that like these two things, then if the impacts of like spreading these messages about gay rights is shaky and unclear, these two things like are enough to beat this weak impact, right? So I think like important is maybe thing to do is here to explain the impact of this, right? So I think this can be extended here. Like you can extend what exactly is going to change, how exactly is going to be impacted. Some ways how it can be done is I think you can just maybe analyze how this interaction of people with this look like. I think you can explain just it's everywhere. It trickles down to many different discussions in terms of like people discuss it at work, in school, etc. It gives some kind of platform for people who are defending these things to say, which often means that you reach some level of compromise in terms of okay, maybe you don't agree about everything in these instances, but like at least you need to concede to some very sensible things around this, and which is like positive kind of moving into this direction. I think the second thing can be is that just this visibility is the only way to get these kind of discussions in how do we say, in some developing world, in some more conservative societies, etc., because you have all of these international companies that collaborate, etc. Thirdly, is that like there is some trickle down in terms of that the way to portray yourself might be that you are like actually LGBT friendly, might be to actually donate money to movements that are fighting something, etc. This is a very good marketing. This is what companies have incentive to do. This is something that like they will actually benefit most out of it, meaning that like often these things will go directly to the movements, which just gives them more money and resources to do stuff they generally do for promoting their rights. And then you can go more into details. Obviously, there are responses on all of these. Max, this is not like the the best possible case that cannot be responded or anything. But just I think these kind of analysis explains and extends what exactly the impact of the argument is. Okay? So not only that you can extend mechanisms or certain like burdens, you can also extend on impacts, just in certain situations when they're not prima facie obvious. Okay? Is this so far so good? Are there any questions? Oh yeah.
How much can you extend on an impact which is probably intuitive by making it a lot stronger? So the example I'm thinking of is the final of LSEIB, where there was something along the lines of like this house prefers to have loved and have lost and to have never loved, or some bullshit like that. And OG goes up and like has a reasonably dry but well-argued case about like how you're probably going to be more happy on net. And then CG goes on like a 7-minute rant about how amazing love is, and it's a lot more persuasive in the explanation of why this love is actually conducive to happiness.
Okay.
But I'm not sure to what extent that was something missing in the OG case, because it's intuitive to an extent that love is good.
Yeah. Okay, great question actually, because I think we can demonstrate few things on this one. So like I didn't watch this specific round, so like I cannot say. Well, I mean, I didn't see the specific analysis, but just generally understand is that closing teams argues to a much larger extent why love is so like everyone has to get it right. Okay, so and which to some extent, in terms of love, is great. To some extent, everyone agrees, right? Okay, so few things here. What would you do as the judge? That's the question. And the question is like, okay, whether this additional analysis persuades me more towards this case, and how can we see it? So I think that there are two questions we need to answer here. I think one is how much more you explain this towards what was explained before. So like, okay, or what was asserted and assumed, etc. So like, okay, everyone agrees that love is great, but like, whether it is the best possible thing in the world, not everyone agrees, right? So like, this is the basic distinction, right? Or this is the sole purpose of your life, maybe this is also the way how it can be run. This is, again, something that everyone agrees. So I think this is like, okay, what is the scale, how much you agree? So what is the comparative, the difference, the delta, whatever, like, word you use, like, just the difference in terms of the impacts. So this is one thing. The second thing is like, how much you explain why these additional things matter. Right? And I think like in the ideal world, closing team would then analyze why this specific case matters. The way how you can explain how it matters might be to say, look, if we explain to you that this is the most important, or sometimes even the only purpose in your life and the only thing that actually makes life worth living, we actually, even though everyone agrees that love is great and like once when you love it is good, we're going to explain to you that, you know, we basically advance our case much more, right? So I think that like you are able to do so in these instances, but still like I think firstly there is disagreement to an extent, right? Because otherwise the opposition will automatically lose. So you need to explain what is the scale of these of the impact, of the comparative of the impact, and secondly, why that specifically matters. The one more thing that I think is important about things is like this importance of weighing in the closing half. You're not obliged to weigh. You don't need to say these things, why they matter, etc. But it really is helpful to the judges and to everyone so that we can all be on the same page why exactly you're explaining this. So I think this is like generally something that not only in this case, but in every other case you should try to explain why your specific contributions, once when you are analyzing further certain claims, why do they matter and what they bring to the debate. Okay? Just imagine you're explaining to a very like kind of a dumb child or something like, okay, here why this is matters, here's why this is most important. This is like obviously in normal words, etc. But like just be very explicit why your specific contributions, what do they bring actually. Okay. The third thing is something that we did mention, which is like characterization and frame, etc. And I'm gonna pause this here for a second and just maybe explain to motivate why frame and characterization should be generally on top of your list when thinking about extensions and generally debate, but specifically extensions. There are a few reasons why I think it should be important. Firstly, is something that Valina already told you, which makes your arguments much more realistic. So what I mean by characterization or frame, I mean is like some version of reality that basically strengthens your arguments while it weakens your opponent's arguments. Not necessarily the other side, but generally opponents. And I think like it has to be defensible version of reality. So like it cannot be like this is a reality and you just make it up, but like it has to be defensible version of reality. Okay? So a few reasons why I think it's very important and why it should be prioritized in your further development as debaters. So first thing is that I think just generally it makes your argument much stronger because, as we heard, they are grounded in some more reality. Rather than structural reasons, I think the second way to maybe understand this is inheritance. Not inheritance in terms of you inherit from your parents' house, but inherent features of certain things, right? What are inherent features? These are some things that cannot be separated from certain concepts. So for example, what are inherent things to social media? It is that quite a lot of people are there, information spread fast, that they want to keep you engaged quite a lot because they want to have ad revenue or because they want to be politically relevant actors, etc. That there are interactions that are different than in-person interactions, etc. Okay, so these are inherent features, features that cannot, I cannot think of social media that doesn't have most of these features, right? Like, it wouldn't be social media. Or religion, let's say, second example. What are the inherent features about religion? Is that people believe in this rather than are persuaded by certain reason, right? I mean, if you are Christian, I cannot give you 3 structural reasons that you're gonna just be persuaded to be atheist. You might, I mean, eventually, but like it's not as simple as that. While if it's a question about something else, it's much easier for because you evaluate more reason and less belief, right? Secondly, is that it's tied to your identity, whether it's national identity in most of the European context, whether it is generally identity, sometimes when you have sectarian cleavages in certain countries, like, I don't know, Syria, Bosnia to an extent, etc. Thirdly, is that it tells you what is right, what is wrong, what is moral, what is immoral, what is the punishment or reward if you do immoral/moral things, right? All of these things are inherent to religion. I cannot think of religion that doesn't have most of these stuff. This wouldn't be religion anymore, right? It would be something else. So, the good thing about the characterization is that you often can use these, you describe the world using these general concepts that are difficult to basically to defeat because they're simply like that, okay? Obviously, you will not always be able to just characterize using these things and no one can say anything, etc. You're gonna get into the territory which is debatable, right? The debate happens there. This is why we're doing it. Like, we're not running from engagement. Just in terms of proving why something is like that is easier if you use some inherent characteristic of something like that. Okay? So I think this is one motivation, because it generally just describes reality, that I think why it should be used. I think the second thing is because I think it provides you very good ways to deal with the other side. Because sometimes 3 certain cases from the other side, we're going to see a few examples on this, simply will be outframed. You're going to have some version of reality that's going to answer to 3 different arguments that the opposition has, which is a very effective ways in responding to the other side. Okay? I think this is specifically important for, which I assume most of the people, everyone here, is for ESL or EFL speakers. I mean, if English is not your native language, it's going to be more difficult for you to debate in English than for people who are like, for whom English is native language. Meaning that you cannot say as many words as they can. You cannot always remember the correct word and then that's going to very effectively communicate what you want. Sometimes you might, forget and just, bug. Sometimes your accent might be difficult, so if you speak, it might be tough, you speak too fast, some judges might lose something, they might not follow, etc. So you generally cannot say as much words as EPL speakers can. English as primary language people can, right? So meaning that you need to find a way to communicate similar level of information, if not words. The way to maximize this is, I think, that if you debate smartly, and if you think of, okay, how can I actually deal with more arguments by one characterization, one frame? How can I have, help my impacts and prove my impacts better, etc. if I have one argument that I prove, one characterization, and then I base everything upon this, right? So I think this should be additional reason why you should really, really care about this stuff as well, right? So if you're top half, you're kind of in a hurry, because, I mean, everyone has 15 minutes, but after these 15 minutes, you talk. If not talk, then you have Prime Minister's speech, and then you talk. You don't have that much time. You cannot chill, you're under stress, you need to panic and prep. I mean, you don't necessarily need to panic, but realistically, it's a very stressful thing. You want to cover as many different areas, because you don't want closing to come up and take one of these areas, right? You're worried, and you are preoccupied because, there will be whole bottom half teams that you won't be able to engage with. They're gonna give you one POI. Which is nice of them, but it is 15 seconds of your engagement, while they'll have 14 minutes to engage with you and to say whatever they want to about you. I mean, they still might lose, but it is still kind of, you need to be ready on all these scenarios. I think what often happens is that then top half teams prioritize basically covering different areas with sufficient analysis and like spamming reasons, etc., without necessarily seeing the bigger pictures. So like not seeing woods for the trees. Like you're preoccupied that, okay, we need to cover this and like what if they run this, etc. So I think this is what like often happens, meaning that like if you think about the strategy, about the characterization, about certain frames, that often will happen that they don't think about it, and then given that these things are great, you can extend with it and win with it. Okay? I think that generally you should think about the frame and strategy in all instances. Just closing allows you more like, you know, room to breathe. Like because you're not in that pressure, etc., you can more prioritize this. Now, in terms of this prep and how do you actually prep for characterization of frames? So like firstly, I mentioned that the factors are inherent. I think this is something that I explained enough, like I don't want to, how do you say, to repeat it again. Yeah, the second thing might be is like, how the world looks like, how does this look like in the world right now, right? So like, okay, just think of literally this happening and what would happen in Twitter, in news, in TikTok, whatever social media you're following, and just think of like what will be reactions, what would, I don't know, say your politicians or Trump or whoever the relevant actor is. Try to think of the world existing by this happening, try to visualize this. Because this is again something that teams on top half don't have time to do, right? They need to have a third structural reason for something because they speak in like 2 minutes and they need to cover everything for you. Like think how these things work. The additional thing that you can think of is you can think of how exactly the top half teams how the top half will play out. And this is where we come to strategy. Because what is strategy as a word? Like, strategy is like long-term planning in terms of how you can plan to basically execute to win, in this case, debate, right? Like how you can go around and then prepare so that you win debate. And if you can like predict, imagine a scenario where you can know exactly what the top half teams are going to say. If you know exactly what they're going to say, it's going to be much easier for you because you know, okay, then we need to answer this, etc., etc. And obviously, we can never know fully, and trust me, even in some very important outruns of majors, like I was made wrong in terms of what teams would run, etc. Sometimes it worked in my favor, sometimes it worked against. I mean, that's life. But more often than not, simply in terms of thinking how the top half team might play out, you'll be able to think of, okay, how can we actually adapt to this and work with this, etc. Okay? All right, so this might be a little bit more abstract, but we're going to go through a few examples. So you're going to see in examples how these things look like, and I'm going to flag like what we did here as well. Okay? Are there any questions for these aspects? Anything? Okay? No. So, okay. Each example, there is a motion and then there is a theme like in the bracket, etc. And one more important thing, all these examples are from real life. So like they're not necessarily me debating, they're sometimes someone else debating, sometimes someone against me or like something that I judge, but like they're all, I think, some illustrative examples of closing things like in real life. So I'm not just making things up, I'm just giving you some things that did work, like at least for a second or first, etc. Okay, so the motion is this house would significantly increase government funding for research into the effect of genetics on human characteristics, development, and behavior, and your CG. And how should the prep look like? How it should look like. What did we say? So we said that for once we want to think of how would this look like in real life, and what do we think the other teams will say? What do you think the other teams will say? Like, what do you think the top half would be about? Can someone give some ideas for OG?
specialize metadata because you want metadata for
Okay, that's op, right?
I would say.
Okay, but yeah, it is the op argument. What else? Yeah.
So, like, if you have something like the Down syndrome or so, you can have a better knowledge of whether it's going to happen or whether you're going to have it, and how to combat it probably.
Okay, so like if done well, you can have some great benefits. Okay, there was one more hand, I think, Jim, or okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
I think you could also argue that it's like, generally because it's a government like funding motion, it's a good investment because if you invest into having better understanding of genetics, then you have to spend less on healthcare for your population in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, you need to speak up a bit.
About locality, because if each country does specialize in funding this, then it will maximize because you specialize in specific genetics and have competitive advantage.
Okay, yeah, okay. But I think generally all things come to few things here, which is like, one, if it is done well, there are lots of benefits can be done. Either you specialize on certain things, or you treat certain illnesses, or you, like, lots of these benefits. And then just, the second thing is, like, we heard a bit on op, like there are some levels of abuse and some issues that might happen. I think the other stuff that actually happened also was like this, like discussion about, you know, race, etc. Are you going to show that, you know, the gov said, look, you're going to show that, you know, all races are equal. You're going to have persuasive tools to persuade, like, racists or people who are in the middle or something like that, because showing them scientifically, and scientists have all these authority, etc. Then op was like, yeah, but there's like, how's it called? Like the biases, and like you believe more into an idea that you already believed before. How's it called? Someone help me. Confirmation bias, yeah? So confirmation bias, and then, you know, someone will have some flawed research with bad, how do you say, bad methodology, and then they will actually prove to some people who are actually racist that they're racist, and they're going to have like more quote-unquote evidence, and therefore they will propagate more racism, etc., etc. All of these things comes out to where does the clash happen? To characterization of how this research will look like. Like, what research are we talking about? Is it about race? Is it about certain illnesses? Is it about some other traits? Who decides, etc.? It all comes down to this. We heard so many ideas, but just, you know, it simply comes down to this characterization of how this research will look like. And I think that like the smart thing to do here from CG is to analyze of like how this research is likely going to look like. And what do you need to analyze here? One, you can analyze the state as the actor, their incentives, what they want to give money for, what do they care, etc. This is more likely going to be illnesses or something that are illnesses more local, etc., rather than, you know, pushing certain agendas, etc. Secondly, that often, you know, scientists will never do these very immoral research, etc. Like, it's firstly, like, I mean, there is reputation that, like, if you did the research with any link, let's say, to race and intelligence or something like that, like, you know, even if you did get funding, which still is unsure that, like, this, you get funding by this motion, that, like, it's going to be very difficult. Everyone wants to differentiate from you, especially in a nowadays climate, right? Using the all political correctness and generally, like, how do you say, a very liberal bias of the universities, etc. And then you can go further and further. But generally, what is the way here is to explain and characterize how government funding for this research, what kind of, how this research look like, what is this likely to research, etc. And what does this happen? Let's see a bit, let's try to abstract it a little bit more and to connect it with the theory that we were talking about before. Firstly, it kind of increases the scope of the impacts on the gov while decreases the harms on the op, right? Secondly, it outframes certain arguments about the race, for example, that did happen in the actual debate, and like a lot of top half was about, you know, whether you solve racism or like whether you move away from racism or you have a bit more racism in terms of these research, etc. So it's not about it, right? And then it just, and also it uses like why now, like what is the now political situation, what are the now incentives, etc. The inheritance, like what is the like the characterization of the scientist, like what is the scientist? Is scientist someone who is do any research, etc. How funding is done, like just simply because you increase funding for something doesn't mean you can get funding for anything, right? You still need to have a proposal to defend it, etc. So all of these things we're talking about, we can use here to think of, okay, to explain some version of reality that helps us in closing government and can be very helpful in this extension. We didn't think of any new special argument that you didn't think of in the prep and now it's a new argument and this is the winning. No, like it's very difficult in this type of motion. But like we thought of analysis that can be helpful in terms of weighing all of these contributions. Does it make sense? I mean, I know it does, but just are you able to follow? Like, there's quite a lot of information, but like, this is generally. Can we go to the second example? Like, are there any questions here?
Narrow down the scope in specific group. How do we handle this?
I think you're doing kind of both. So it increases in terms of that you say, look, harms on op happens less, benefits on gov happens more, but you're also kind of limiting yourself on one pool. Say likely things are gonna do will be kind of things like Alzheimer, depression, you know, like these kind of things. So you can do both, right? Just because you limited the scope doesn't mean that the impact is necessarily also limited, right? So you say it is similar to let's say motion about the rainbow capitalism. You can say this motion happens mostly in developing countries, and then okay, in developing countries maybe the impact or the difference of the impact might be huge, right? Because whether I don't know in Bangladesh someone is gonna constantly be bombarded with gay gay rights and stuff like this might have huge impacts. But still it narrows down, right? It's like you narrow down like lots of other countries throughout this. So like you can do both those things. Just because you say like it happens to only to the subset of the stakeholder doesn't mean that the impact on them is lower. Okay? Any more questions or comments? Yeah.
How would you phrase this extension to avoid data describing as relative?
Yeah, you can say, for example, look, so far in the top half, it is unclear how does this research look like. We're going to provide you inherent reasons of why this research will be done in a well way, so that you increase the benefits on the gov while decreasing benefits on the op. The importance of this extension is, and then what we said, like that you basically increase your arguments, the other side minimizing, etc. And then the whip also can furthermore explain this and like name it, etc. So I think this is the better way. Probably there are even better ways. So you can just add maybe more time to think of, okay, how can we actually position this case, etc. I think bad way is to say we're going to have vertical extension. This is something that I noticed. That teams are doing, like vertical extension, which is like, the way how I understand it is that, look, you have extension and then you are going deeper into one part, so you're making it vertical, right? I think it's bad because the first thing that I think of when I hear a vertical extension is like, they don't have an extension, or like they have a little bit of extension. So like, maybe be specific in terms of where exactly are you vertical, right? And also you don't sound like, when you say we have vertical extension, you sound derivative. When you say, okay, we feel this specific burden because these changes, etc., you sound a bit more like you know what you're doing. The second also thing that I think can be a bad way to position this extension is something that like, or like the part of it, is something that like, to say, okay, top half is talking about, how race is gonna get better because people are gonna have actual papers that prove that racism is wrong. Op says that, racists will actually be empowered because some of these papers will be flawed, and actually they will point out this research. And then this argument is a wash or a deadlock, etc. Why do I think this is a bad way? So to phrase it, few reasons. Firstly, is because I think ultimately there is no wash. What does it mean? Imagine this was world schools or any other format. There was no bottom half. The only thing that was happening was this. What would happen? Like, judge wouldn't point, okay, maybe they will look at style. But let's say there is, the rules are same as BP, right? I mean, there wouldn't be a coin toss. Like, there will still be, okay, maybe some way. Maybe it's very close, etc. I think this is a bad way to think about it. There is no wash. This is bad, and I think a lazy way. Deadlock also. Deadlock means like, I mean, there were claims made on the clash of both sides, and then we're going to make some other claims. Like, just, that's a better way to do it. I think a better way to do it is to say, look, because of these reasons that opposition says, this difference to which government is able to show their case is very limited, and that's where we can expand. In this case, you don't expand here. In this case, what you say is basically you give different reasons why this is not in debate, right? This is not like, we don't do this kind of research. We are kind of past of that ideas in academia, in generally in business, even in states. This is a suicide for career of these scientists, etc. So like this is not, they gave reasons, we gave reasons, it's a wash, it's a deadlock, now kiss, and there is our new argument that in no way engages with this. Why? Because if you're doing that, you're just saying, look, it's difficult to say who wins the top half, and we're going to bring an argument that doesn't engage with the top half at all. This is a bad way to do it. The good way is to say, look, for these reasons, top half are weak because they're debating something that is ridiculous, right? We are debating something that is relevant, and here are the reasons why it is relevant. Okay? So I think this is kind of one of these situations when you have, that Chris was mentioning about the buzzwords. Like basically, you hear certain things, and then like they become the buzzwords, and then some very well ideas become like trivialized to these buzzwords and to, like just, okay, they say this is deadlock, we go on. Okay? Let's go maybe to one or two more examples. Wait, I'll skip this one because I don't have that much time. I want to show something else. So this one is this house opposes the stigma against laziness, and we are CO, we are up. What is the way? Okay, maybe we can speed up a little bit so that we cover a bit more examples. What is the way to approach this motion? Obviously, the motion, I mean, there are a few, I would say, levels how this motion can be seen. The first level is just generally whether, laziness is good or bad, right? You can say on Gov, but it's kind of fine to be lazy, chill, you go watch a movie, etc. You're still gonna find some job, etc., right? In op is like, no, you have to work a lot and go to, debate as well and speak 3 languages and then be competitive and have internship, etc. And this is better because you're going to earn more money and the money happiness, etc. So this is one level of debating, right? This is the motion. This house believes that laziness brings more harm than good, right? Because this is that motion. Then there is another level which is like the stigma against laziness, which is, how can we actually talk about this laziness in terms of, okay, whether, how does this stigma look like? Okay, not necessarily whether laziness is good or bad, but whether us saying shame on you because you're lazy is good or bad. Or however the stigma looks like. It's a bit more complicated than this, but just hopefully you understand. Okay? So we get this through analyzing the words. What can we get here from opposition? So one, again, real life case is that, look, you can think of you can think of many reasons, why it is good that we kind of force people to be less or more lazy. Whether this stigma, whether people are generally how they say, feel bad when they're stigmatized and when they tell you something, especially if they cannot easily change about them, etc. But the way to approach this is to think of, okay, what is inherent to laziness? How does the laziness look like? And how does the laziness look like? It looks like that everything is incredible effort, right? Like, you need to go to like, you order deliveries because you're just too lazy to go pick up pizza from like 2 blocks away. You like cannot keep with deadlines, with whether it's homework, whether like studying for exams or anything like that. It's just too much of a hassle. Anything that is not like endless scrolling, etc., is like different. Like it just destroys you. But the second thing is that like laziness kind of puts you in a position where like even more things become difficult, right? And then you become more lazy, and then even more things become more difficult, and it goes further and further. The third thing that you can say here is, look, we are so prone to laziness. Like laziness gives you short-term gratification, and you need to overcome it. You need to have short-term harms in order to have certain long-term, unsure, like really like uncertain, right, benefits, etc. Right? I mean, if you study and you pull an all-nighter, you feel horrible because you didn't sleep, you are shaking from the caffeine, you, I don't know, like you're irritated, you are stressed whether you're gonna pass the exam, etc., etc. And then, like, firstly, it's not sure whether you're gonna pass this exam. It's not sure whether you're gonna finish the uni, whether it's gonna give you the good job. Like all of these things are uncertain. But if you just say, I'm not gonna go to exam like this time, and you just play, I don't know, games, you just get instant gratification, right? So there's lots of asymmetry in terms of not like being lazy and not being lazy, etc. Specifically given how much we are bombarded by other stuff like social media, etc. that kind of are designed to make you like constantly like brainwashed and just going this movement on whatever scrolling application is of your choosing. Now, how does all these things fit together? You can explain that laziness is a trap, and that the only way that is horrible, that destroys your mental health, etc., the only way to escape it is actually to feel like crap from the beginning when you start to see the warning signs. And that you don't even start, like you start with 1 cigarette, and then you don't smoke. You're gonna smoke if you start at all. So you need to stop like taking that 1 single cigarette. So the same logic is here. Like it is so horrible thing. It is addictive. It is literally drugs that pulls you out in the hell of mental health issues and like inability and like you feel horrible, etc. You cannot escape, and becomes more and more difficult to escape. The only way to stop it is if there is a stigma that's gonna tell you should feel like a horrible person if you just even try to go there. This is again, I'm not saying anything that is out of, I didn't tell you anything that you don't know. You know all of this stuff, right? Just I'm telling you the perspective, how you can think of. And again, let's see a bit abstractly how this case can be reached. Firstly, by considering specific words in the motion, like why they're there, etc., like why the motion is like this. Secondly, of thinking how does this look like in the reality? How does the laziness look like in the reality? Yeah, it was not difficult for me to think about this. It was relatively easy for both me and my partner. Like we were on the same page here, like yeah, especially in that period of time. Think about stigma, think about all of this stuff, and right now, all of these ideas about endless scrolling, short-term gratification, etc. Think of world right now, right? We get this information from the world right now. And then these things help you with the case. I cannot tell you whatever case how to reach extension. Just give you a few questions you can ask that can help you characterize and think of extensions in certain cases. Okay? Are there any questions for this? Is it okay if you do one more example or? Okay. Yeah, okay, one more example. Okay. We're gonna go quick. So this house will introduce brothels in military bases in your city. And then, again, how this extension can be, like what this debate is about. And then you can think of, okay, what the OG is gonna say, they're gonna say, I don't know, like soldiers are under stress and sexual, sex is something that is very important to them, and I don't know, they're gonna get access to this, they're gonna be less stressed, they might be better in doing whatever, war. You might also reduce sexual harassment or even rape, because in these instances, then NOC will say, yeah, but rape happens because of the 7 other reasons, and doesn't, is not solved by this, not mutually exclusive, etc. Generally, prostitution is bad, it's horrible, it often is linked to, certain issues, it harms women disproportionately, objectivize them, etc., etc. Obviously, all of these claims need to be proven, etc. There's lots of nuances, some other stuff to say, but these are some basic ideas that you come up when you see this motion, right? And then I think you can think of, okay, how can we maybe change the comparative? Is there something we can actually say to maybe alter the comparative this round? And there is, again, something here that might be used in some other rounds as well. Not in all of them. Now I think that lots of people are using them all the time, and I dislike it, but there are instances where it can be used. The idea is to say, look, these things happen on both sides of the house, something else is comparative. In this case, something you can do from CG, say, look, when you have military bases, you often have, not that, how do you say, or where this makes lots of difference. You have kind of war zones, you have not either failed states or generally not most accountable states, you have lots of demand for prostitution, which generally exists, but here in particular, given that all the reasons OG says. So what the comparative in this debate is not whether we're going to have brothels or not. We're going to have them anyway. Just the question is whether they're going to be put by warlords, local militia, and people that we have a little accountability of, or someone who is state that actually is sending these soldiers, which often are somewhat more accountable, has some more standards, etc. And then what the difference is not prostitution for or against, or whether the soldiers have access to prostitution for or against. What the difference is who is the one who is creating these brothels, and consequentially, certain different things that change. Firstly, some level of protection for these women, white is better, and some level of standards. Secondly, STDs, etc., etc. Again, there is more analysis that needs to be given why brothels will be put anyway, and why this is the only comparative, right? And then more analysis of why these impacts are important. I want to flag you this example as the sort of example of, these things, these things can happen anyway. This is the different things. Important thing here is don't just overuse this anywhere. Just because there is one reason on both sides doesn't mean that something is fully symmetric and you can say, this happens anyway, we just gonna run our case. Lots of analysis needs to be put to say that, look, there is lots of, we already gave it 3-4 good reasons, and they need to be expanded, more need to be given, etc. Okay? So this is the logic. There is one more example with the same logic. I'm just gonna flag you here. This is this one. This helps you get the narrative that forgiveness is a virtue. Again, if you're CG, the top half you can envision saying, whether it is good that people forgive or not. But I think the good frame here is to say, look, often people in most of the instances forgive anyway for a plethora of reasons. One is because just generally with time you just stop being that, petty and still things hurt less. You start to see the other side. Potentially there is some, you see that the other side was sorry or something like that. Secondly, just, you want to have that relation, if you are if it's partner, if it was a nice relationship, you kind of want to have that relationship again, or if it's friendship, you want to have this friendship, etc. And then, again, maybe you can give more reasons. I'm sure that you can give quite a lot of reasons why forgiveness, generally people will forgive in the absence or without the absence of this narrative anyway. Then the comparative becomes whether it is good that this narrative leads to the sooner forgiveness in certain situations, and whether it's good or bad. And in the case of CG, you can say it's bad because, firstly, there are some instances where forgiveness should be done, but now it's going to be done. I think it's maybe better to avoid this because then it kind of harms your frame, but maybe it can also be run. But I think second thing can be, look, if you forgive, but don't actually forgive it. So you say, I forgive you, or behave as, or you kind of move on without fully forgiving, because you're pushed and it is expected you're going to do, because everyone is pressuring you, etc., which is how this narrative looks like, means that you don't actually forgive, and then you're likely going to kind of actually feel petty in the future, feel that you never actually got any closure. This relation will be worse. You might do something to harm the other side, which creates the other all these things, etc. So then you change the comparative in terms of when people forgive, whether it's good, etc. In terms of whether, okay, in most instances people forgive anyway. The comparative that changes with this narrative is whether it's good to force people sooner, and here are some harms that stem from this. Okay? Okay, this was maybe a bit too fast, but yeah, if you have questions on it, like, you can ask me at any point. Okay, are there any questions right now? Yeah.
If you're opening in the brothels and military bases, if opening government makes their argument as to why they want soldiers that have access to sex and they don't have that on opposition, is it a knife for them to say that actually on opposition they do already have access in a black market way already?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is one of these situations, but I think you can say, look, this is not a knife, because, like, obviously access to sex is kind of a little bit more or less. So you can say, okay, maybe not everyone will go to but like most of the people will, so you maybe increase like by 5% access to sex, right? Because the scale, how much the argument is important and to which extent it is proven, is something that is allowed to disagree on the bench, right? So I think you can basically just reframe this, that it is about this, right? But yeah, I mean, unless they are like maybe there is a scenario where they can do all of these stuff that you are really, really screwed, but I think they're rare. Like, whenever you're afraid of knife, don't do these things like saying, oh, here is weighing, and then like 3 points of rebuttal on your teams in front of you. Rather just think of, okay, how can we portray as that disagreements of whether our claims exist is like the importance, which argument is more important, because this is explicitly allowed. So you always try to basically portray it like this, okay?